Okay, Pete.
Yes, sir.
Let's start by telling us about how you first became interested in flying.
When I was 13 years old on the farm in southwestern Minnesota, and my sister Geneva, who was 2 years younger than me, she and I were sitting on a haystack and a beautiful summer day, and a Ford trimotor airplane flew over. And I said to my sister, someday I'm going to be there. And the Japanese made it happen a little bit sooner than I planned on when they bombed Pearl Harbor. And then I enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and which is now the Air Force. And I was inducted in January of 1943, and I was going to be a pilot. And in my training, during that time, I developed a skin disease on my right hand. When I did like this, the blood and the pus would drip out, and my fingernails rotted. And so I was taken off active status, and then after 6 months, it was cured, and I went back on active status. And the very day I got back on active status, the government had issued something out, the Air Force had. They had too many pilots. There were 179 pilots in my class of 1943 G, and they took all but 50 of them out. 129 were taken out. I was one of them. And then I became a radio operator gunner, and I went to school to learn learn Morse code, and went to gunnery school, and then got in a heavy bomber outfit and went to Europe. Finished the war there, and was planning to come back to the States and be redeployed to the Pacific in B-29s when I was pulled out to go to the Mediterranean Air Transport Command. The Mediterranean Air Transport Command flew throughout the Mideast there, and things were going along fairly well, and then we were notified that our squadron was going to be redeployed to the Pacific as an air evacuation outfit. And we were in the replacement depot in Naples, Italy, when the war ended. So I didn't have to go. Came back to the U.S., and after kissing the ground, and I did, at Newport News, Virginia, I came back home and decided to use my GI Bill money to become a pilot. So I got my pilot's license in 1947.
And then,
I'm going to stop playing.
okay, so once you got your pilot's license in 1947, what was your flying experience that succeeded that training?
That followed it, or?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. That's a good question. I took the acrobatic course. That was really something. And but I was a single-engine pilot, and maintained that for many years. And then, as time went on, let me see, when did I get my multi-engine rating? My multi-engine rating I got in about 1980-ish, in there somewhere. And then we had this twin Comanche, and used it in business and so on. I was in the broadcasting business, so we had stations in Wisconsin and also here in Holland. And I did a lot of flying. And then my flying, staying with flying now, let's see. I got my instrument rating as well. And then in 1983, I sold my company. And I retained the airplane, however. And my wife and I did a terrific amount of flying, all over the United States and the Bahamas and Canada. And we just did a lot of it. And I kept on, I kept current. I was absolutely current, never had a problem. I was grateful for that. But did flying in icing conditions and total fog business and that sort of thing.
So your experience was as, and you flew just for pleasure and you flew related to
And business, yeah. Mm-hmm. Went to Washington, D.C. Many times because that's the headquarters of the FAA regarding, FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and broadcasting. That's where the headquarters is over there. Went there many times. Washington International Airport there, landed there many times.
Tell me about the first Wings of Mercy flight that you piloted.
Well, may I go back a little bit?
Okay.
Ask me what got me started in Wings of Mercy.
Well, that was sort of part of this, but that was
Sure.
my certainly question. So
Sure.
when did get you started? When did it?
Okay. It was in 1990. We were retired in Florida, had a place down there, had a boat up here and a boat down there, and had a car down there, and of course a car up here, and my twin-engine airplane. I had a Seneca 2 at that time. Oh, loved it. Counter-rotating engines. Oh, that was a sweetheart. And so we would go to the Bahamas and to Key West for lunch and do things like that. Just flying any old time anywhere we could go. We did. Well, it was in November of 1990. My favorite fishing crew in my boat. And we were 35 miles southwest of Naples, Florida. And the Gulf was as calm as this floor is right now. And I had just put my line into the water. And I heard a voice, just as clearly as I'm speaking to you now. Never had happened before in my whole life. Peter, there's more to life than this. My knees start to shake. I didn't say a thing to the guys. I knew they didn't say it. When I came home, I went for walks by myself in the evening. And I said, hey, are you losing up here? I heard no voices. I didn't hear any confirmation, but I didn't think that I was having a mental problem. 2 weeks this went on. I didn't sleep very well. And then I said to my wife that there's something that I've got to tell you, but let's go out, have lunch together, pack a lunch, and we'll go out to the Orange Grove somewhere, which we did. And so I told her this story. And here's what she did. Now, this is the second time that God entered directly into my life. She immediately said, we've got to sell out and go home. And I said, you're crazy. We've got this made in the shade. But she doesn't argue. She's not that kind of a person. She makes a statement, and that's just the way it is. So about 2 days later, having coffee after dinner, I said to her, are you sure about what you said? Yes, she says, I am. Okay. So now it's February of 1991, February, and we sell our place in Florida. And I didn't tell this story to anybody until about 10 years ago. after wings was started. Now, I'll get to that after a moment. And our friend says, well, what are you going to do? I says, I don't know, but we're going to go back home. We just are going to go back home. We came back in February, and the grandkids were happy to see us. I think the kids were. And I'm sitting in my office, which was upstairs, day after day, and wondering and reading and imagining things. And I was not content. I knew that. And March and April and May. In May, a man from Zealand by the name of Les Sla, he and I owned a 210 before, together, years before. And he quit flying, and I had bought his airplane. So I got to know him. And we stayed friends. And then he called. And he says, Peter, I've been thinking about you. Why don't you use your airplane to fly low-income people that can't afford to go to Mayo Clinic and to Johns Hopkins and Cleveland Clinic and so on, and do it for free? I hung up the phone, went downstairs. My wife was sitting at the table. I says, honey, Les Sla just called. Here's what he said. Here's what she did. There's your call. That was the fourth time that God entered directly. First out in a fishing boat. Secondly in Florida when she said, let's sell out and go home. Third was Les Sla. Now fourth, this. Ever since then, haven't heard a word of confirmation or nothing. I went upstairs and I said to the Lord, show me a path, just a roadmap or something. Nothing. Nothing. In May, I finally got off my butt and went down to the Holland Hospital. And I said, I'd be happy to fly low-income people that need medical treatment somewhere, and I'll do it for free. I got my first mission on July 9 of 1991. There was a little 18-year-old girl about this tall, her brother 21 years old, this tall, both aging, disease, and cancer, and their mother. They had never been in an airplane in their lives, and here was a 68-year-old guy, along with a co-pilot, going to take them across Lake Michigan to Rochester, Minnesota. Beautiful day, beautiful flight. Got them over there, got them out, refueled the airplane, got back in the airplane, and somewhere over Wisconsin, somewhere, it came to me as clearly as I'm looking at you now that this is where God wants you. I got back and contacted Tulip City Airport and says, hey, I want to get an organization going, and got a group of pilots together. First person to join was Jay VandenBosch, a twin-engine airplane, and Russ Hyma. And they were number one, number two pilots that joined. And I thought we were just going to have a little organization in Holland, New Zealand. That's what I thought. And after a few years, my father-in-law, after a worship service on a Sunday morning, said, we'd go and pick him up and bring him back home. He says, by what right do you have to keep this organization small like this? Wow. And my vision began. And Holland's Sentinel heard of it. And he says, we'd like to do a story on you. And so they came out and did a picture, and they had someone interview me, and she said that this gal I was doing the interview, and he said, the editor said, you're going to be on the front page of the Sentinel, Saturday's issue. Well, Saturday came and I went to the mailbox because our mail was, we had a deal out there that where they put the Sentinel. And I grabbed it, and lo and behold, there's about 2/3 of the front page was my story. Because I was a local businessman, I had been president of the hospital board for a period of time. I'd served on the Holland Tulip City committee, Tulip Time committee. I had served on a Tulip Time committee. And so they had all that ammunition, and that launched us. That was the thing that launched us. And we are now in our 18th year, and we have, the total organization has done over 5,100 flights to date. And I am surrounded by the greatest group of givers I ever experienced in my life. These pilots are absolutely awesome. Awesome. That they will take their plane, they will fly to Greenville, for an example, and pick up a mother and a child who has to go to, let's say, Baltimore, Maryland. They've never seen these people in their lives. They're not allowed to receive any remuneration from them in a gift or anything. And they bring them there, and they come on back. We, through the generosity of individuals, companies, corporations, churches, and so on, pay for the fuel used on that flight. But that's it. And the organization has grown and grown. It's just awesome. I want to get back to this little story. We go to Christ Memorial Church, Holland, and about 10 years ago, the pastor called me and says, "I'd like to see you." So I went over and saw him. He says, "How did you get this started?" Well, now when I sit across from the pastor of my church, it's almost like sitting in the presence of God. Well, I said, "Sir, I've never told this story." "Well, tell it to me." I did. "You've got to tell our church." Well, we had 2 worship services in the morning then, which were both packed, 1,500 people at each service. Now, I'd been on radio and television, and I'd been interviewed by newspaper people, but when you're in front of your own people in your own church, oh, baby, hey, that's a different story. But I told the story. And then, of course, I told the board. And it is so evident to me that this outfit, from the beginning, was a God-planned deal. It wasn't me. And the board members that I have on the board are awesome. These are men, businessmen, who are committed to the future of Wings of Mercy. Day I'm no longer here, I can die in knowing that, hey, Wings of Mercy is going down the road because of the kinds of people that are on that board. We had a board member at one time by the name of Rick Seegers of Seegers Seed Company. Rick was a pilot, and then he lost his, through a health problem, he lost his pilot's, not certificate, but his medical. So he knew that I wanted pilots on the board, only pilots. And so he said, "I'll resign and you get someone else on here." I said, "All right, when are you going to do this?" "Well, at the next board meeting." Okay. So I arranged it that he was the last to speak. And Rick said something that became our benchmark. Our benchmark. Says, gentlemen, he says, keep this thing squeaky clean and never be ashamed of the name of Jesus Christ. And that has stuck with our outfit. So any plans for the future, if it doesn't meet those, or anything we're going to do, it just, and I've been in fundraising now, maybe for, let's say 18 years, 17 years, something. The people have supported us fantastically, even through these tough times that we now have. We are not wanting. And I attribute it to the pilots and to the board of keeping this thing absolutely squeaky clean. And we have pilots now in 8 different states, all part of this. And our vision for the future is to expand to, for an example, Kentucky. And that's going to be my first effort very shortly. And then others will follow it.
That was great. That was wonderful.
So my brother.
Yes. We can go to that next if you'd like.
But you do the,
Okay.
you orchestrate.
All right.
Please do.
I'll
Please
make
do.
sure we get to it.
All right.
Okay. What have you learned over the years from these people that you've helped and your organization has helped?
I've learned this. What a privilege it is for me to be, having been chosen to head this outfit, to help others. They have told us in writing, people have written me, you are earth angels. You saved the life of my child. How can we ever repay you? My son and his wife are of low income, and you help them. You people are something else. It just goes on and on and on. And one of the most touching stories I can tell is on Christmas Eve of 1991. Muskegon Hackley Hospital called me. I started the organization, so I was the president, secretary, and treasurer, and everything, and all at once. And so I was then also the flight director. And the call came, and they said, we know about your organization. We have a little girl that has a brain tumor that's got to go to Mayo Clinic now. And these are low-income people, the doctor said. I says, I'll do it. So Christmas afternoon, I flew to Muskegon and picked up this little girl, Megan Alexander, and her parents. The grandparents were there. They were crying because they thought they would never see their little granddaughter alive again. I said, come on, we've got to go. So the doctor had ordered that I not fly higher than 6,000 feet. When we flew, making our arrangements with the FAA, you're assigned an altitude. And I told them, I said, I must not go above 6,000 feet. And so they tracked that. And we were right over the Mississippi River when the father tapped me on the shoulder and says, her temperature has gone up to 106. What should we do? No, you have to make that decision. I said, we can land at this airport down here. and we get an ambulance and go to the hospital right now. How far? He says, is it to Rochester? I says, 11 minutes. He says, let's go to Rochester. I contacted, I'd been in contact, but I called Minneapolis Center and said, we've got an emergency aboard. And they said, stand by. And they got a hold of Rochester, and Rochester got a hold of me. And they said, you can have any runway you want. We've stopped all the traffic. And of course, I knew that the wind direction was from the south, so I asked for 200 degrees. But I also asked for a ambulance to be on the runway, so that, and I asked the tower that we could stop the airplane on the runway and do that, and they approved that. And as I'm approaching the airport and seeing us in line with the runway, I see the flashing lights of the ambulance, and tower says, just as soon as you're capable of stopping, you stop. Shut your engines off, and they'll be right over. And that's what happened. By the time I've got the luggage out of the airplane, they had that little girl on life support system. And they left. We refilled and came back. On Christmas morning, at 10:30, phone rings, and it's the father. He says, we have witnessed a Christmas miracle. Our little girl is playing on the bed, and she's in good shape. That little girl has never left me. Year after year, we have it didn't happen every year. Let's stop at that. But we have a fundraiser in Muskegon. We've had that for 14 years in a row. We just had our 14th last week, Saturday. Anyway, she and her mother would come there. And I've seen her when she was like 8, 9 years old and growing. And I saw her this past Saturday. And she's ready to graduate from college. And the mother said, we never would have been able to do this without you. And it's stories like that. They're endless. They're really endless.
So how many flights have you personally flown for Wings of Mercy?
I have 201. 201 flights. Yeah. And I miss it yet today. I miss it. I gave it up 6 years ago. And my son, Mark, is an anesthesiologist in Massachusetts. And he called me just before my birthday. And it was 6 years ago. And says, Dad, how are you? And so on, happy birthday. And yeah, I says, I just finished my multi-engine rating review and my instrument rating. I got my physical. I'm all set to go. So how long are you going to keep flying? So I don't know. How many years have you been flying? 56. He says, have you ever thought about quitting while you're ahead? And did that ever make an impression on me? That I should devote my attention to the management of Wings and the expansion of Wings, but not necessarily the flying. And so I gave it up. It was a tough, tough thing to do.
What would you like to say to the people who will be continuing to move Wings of Mercy into the future? Words of advice, words from your experience, if you could carry on your vision, what would that be?